My name is Eleanora May Whitmore, but most people just call me Nora. I am 82 years old, sitting in my small living room in a retirement community in Ohio. The walls are quiet, the air smells faintly of lavender from the candle my nurse lit this morning, and outside the window, autumn leaves tumble across the yard like forgotten promises. I've carried this story in my heart for more than 60 years. It is a story so heavy that it nearly crushed me. For decades, I wanted to bury it, to never speak of it again. But silence is a dangerous thing. It poisons the soul. Today, I will tell it all, so maybe someone out there will understand. Maybe someone will find strength in my pain. Come closer, child. Yes, you. Sit with me, lean in, and listen carefully. Because what I'm about to share will sound unbelievable, like something out of a movie. But it happened. To me. It all began on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my honeymoon. I was only 21 years old then, a girl with dreams bigger than my small hometown of Bloomington, Indiana. My mother had died when I was 16, and my father, Harold Whitmore, was a strict, commanding man. He owned acres of farmland and had built a reputation for being both generous and cruel, depending on who you asked. To the church, he was a respected elder. To me, he was a storm. I thought marriage would free me from him. When I met Clifford Ames, a tall, handsome man with a charming smile and soft southern drawl, I believed God had finally sent me salvation. He told me he loved my kindness, my voice, my way of listening. And after only 6 months of courting, we married. I remember my white lace gown, the borrowed pearls from Aunt June, and how Clifford squeezed my hand at the altar. I thought he was nervous, like me. Now I know it was guilt. We spent one night in a hotel in Chicago before Clifford insisted we travel out to my father's farm to bless the marriage in the family home. I argued, begged even to go to Niagara Falls like we had planned. But Clifford's voice turned cold. Your father insisted, Nora. We don't want to disappoint him. That should have been my first warning. The night we arrived, my father greeted us with open arms. His smile was wide, his handshake firm, and his eyes hungry. I felt it immediately, the way his gaze lingered too long on me in my wedding dress. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. Dinner was served, wine was poured, laughter filled the dining room. Then my father raised his glass and said words I can still hear echoing across my bones. To Clifford, thank you for being a man of your word. $1 million well spent. My fork clattered onto the plate. What did you say? I asked. Clifford didn't look at me. His hands trembled as he lifted his wine. Nora, I had debts. Your father helped. This is for us, for our future. But I couldn't hear the rest. The room tilted, my chest tightened, and my world collapsed. It was then I realized. My husband had sold me to my father. On my honeymoon, for $1 million. I screamed. I begged. I tried to run. But my father locked the doors, and Clifford, my own husband, refused to meet my eyes. That night, everything I thought I knew about love, safety, and family was ripped apart. I won't describe every detail of what happened in that house. Some pain is too deep to put into words. But I will say this. It was the night my childhood finally ended, and the night I learned that monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes, they sit at the dinner table and call themselves father. The following morning, I sat in the kitchen, numb, staring at a cracked mug of coffee. Clifford came in, pale and silent. I wanted to throw the mug at him, to scream until the walls fell down. Instead, I whispered, "Why?" He finally looked at me. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. I owed men money, Nora. Dangerous men. Your father offered me a way out. I didn't think he'd. I didn't think. You didn't think? I hissed. You didn't think about me? About what it would do to me? Clifford buried his face in his hands, but there were no tears. That was the day I realized he had no soul left to cry with. From that day forward, my marriage was a prison. My father held power over me, and Clifford became his accomplice. To the world, we looked like a young couple starting out. Inside, I was breaking. I stayed silent for years. Fear was my cage. But silence doesn't erase pain, it multiplies it. And child, I need you to understand this. What is done in darkness always fights its way to the light. Because 60 years later, here I sit, an old woman with shaky hands, finally speaking. And this is only the beginning of my story. You haven't yet heard how I escaped, how I found pieces of hope in the ashes, and how I lived to tell it. But for now, let my words sink in. On my honeymoon, my husband sold me for $1 million so that my father could abuse me. If you are still here, child, do me a kindness. Subscribe, like, and share the story. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It helps more people hear the truth of women like me who have suffered in silence. When people talk about their honeymoon, they smile. They share pictures of sunsets on beaches, candlelit dinners, and laughter in hotel rooms. My honeymoon was different. It was the night I realized that the man I had chosen, the man I trusted, was nothing more than a liar who sold me for survival. After that night in my father's house, something inside me shattered. I remember waking up the next morning in my childhood bedroom. The same pale pink wallpaper I had when I was 12, the same creaky wooden bed frame. Only this time, I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't safe. I could hear my father downstairs whistling as if nothing had happened. I could hear Clifford moving about, pretending to be a dutiful son-in-law. And I sat on that bed with my hands clutched together, feeling like a ghost in my own skin. Clifford came in after a while. His tie was crooked, his eyes downcast. He whispered, "Nora, let's go home. Please. Let's just move on." Move on? The words made me want to scream. But I didn't. I was raised to keep quiet, to not shame the family, to obey. That's what my mother had taught me before she died, though I think even she hadn't known how dark my father's soul really was. So I packed my small suitcase and walked out of that farmhouse with Clifford. To the neighbors, we were the glowing newlyweds returning from a blessed visit with family. But inside, I was already a prisoner. Clifford took me to a small rented apartment in Indianapolis. It should have felt like a fresh start, but the walls were thin, the lights dim, and every corner seemed to whisper betrayal. I tried to play the role of wife. I cooked meals. I ironed his shirts. I smiled when the landlady asked how we were settling in. But Clifford and I barely spoke. When I looked at him, all I saw was the man who had sold me. He would try to hold my hand, and I would flinch. At night, he lay next to me in bed, but I turned my back to him, staring at the cracked ceiling. One evening, I finally asked, "Do you feel any guilt?" He rubbed his temples and muttered, "I did what I had to do, Nora. You'll understand one day. The world isn't kind. It eats weak men alive. Your father saved us." Saved us. I spat. He destroyed me. And you helped him. He slammed his fist against the table so hard the plates rattled. "Enough." His voice shook. "You'll not speak against your father again." And that's when I realized Clifford wasn't just broken. He was owned. My father hadn't just bought my body. He had bought Clifford's loyalty too. It didn't take long before my father started visiting. He would arrive on weekends, dressed neatly, carrying baskets of food as though he were a generous parent blessing his children. Neighbors adored him. He donated to the church, shook hands at town fairs, and always had a smile ready. But behind closed doors, his visits meant terror for me. Clifford would step aside, silent, while my father reminded me that my silence kept our family honor intact. He'd tell me no one would believe me if I ever spoke out, that people respected him too much. And I believed him. The shame sat in my chest like a heavy stone. In church, when the pastor preached about purity and family values, I would sit stiff, praying God would strike me down so I wouldn't have to carry the burden anymore. But I never died. I just kept breathing. By the time I turned 23, people in town began asking when Clifford and I would start a family. I wanted children more than anything, but the thought of bringing a baby into this broken marriage made me sick. And yet, my father's shadow stretched long over my life. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, if I became a mother, I could carve out something pure, something untouched by the filth of betrayal. So when I found out I was pregnant, I wept. Not just tears of fear, but of hope. But Clifford wasn't happy. He looked at me with nervous eyes and muttered, "Can we even afford a child?" I wanted to slap him. Instead, I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "This baby will be mine. No one will take that from me." I was wrong. At 6 months pregnant, my father came to visit again. My belly was round, my back ached, but I felt proud of carrying life inside me. That night, after Clifford had gone to bed, my father cornered me in the kitchen. His eyes burned with something cruel. "You think that child will save you?" he whispered. My throat tightened. "It's mine. You can't touch it." His smile was cold. "Everything you have belongs to me. Don't forget that." I will never forget that night, because it was the night I first felt my baby kick while I was being reminded of my chains. I pressed my hand against my stomach, tears streaming down my face, silently begging God to protect my child. 3 months later, I went into labor too early. The doctors said it was complications, that sometimes young mothers just lose their babies. But in my heart, I knew it was the stress, the weight of secrets too heavy for a body to bear. I held my tiny daughter for only an hour before they took her away. She was so small, so fragile. I named her Clara, which means bright. She never opened her eyes. Clifford barely spoke to me at the hospital. He stood in the corner, hands shoved in his pockets, looking more like a stranger than a husband. My father never came, though I knew he had caused it all. I returned home empty-handed, broken, and hollow. After Clara's death, I made a vow. I would never let my father steal another piece of me. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but one day I would break free. I started keeping a small notebook hidden beneath the floorboards of our bedroom. In it, I wrote letters to my daughter, to the child I lost. I poured out my grief, my anger, my dreams of escape. I told her about the sky outside our window, about the way the neighbors' children laughed, about how I longed to take her to the park. That notebook became my secret strength. Every word I wrote reminded me I was still alive, still fighting. One night, about 2 years after Clara's death, Clifford stumbled home drunk. His debts had returned, and he was drowning again. He grabbed me by the arm and shouted, "Why can't you just forgive me? Why can't you be a good wife?" I pulled away, fire in my chest. "Because you sold me. You let my father destroy me." His face twisted with rage. And then, for the first time, he raised his hand against me. The slap echoed through the tiny apartment. I fell to the floor, my cheek burning, my heart pounding. And as I lay there, I realized something chilling. Clifford had become my father's mirror. That was the night I stopped loving him completely. The next morning, I woke up with a swollen cheek and a cold determination. I looked in the mirror and whispered to myself, "No more." But before I could plan my escape, before I could even decide where to go, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, standing there with a smug smile and a folded envelope in his hand, was my father. And inside that envelope was a document that would change the course of my life forever. If you've listened this far, don't leave me alone in this. Subscribe, like, and share the story. Write in the comments where you're listening from. Your voice reminds me that mine still matters. I stood in the doorway, frozen. My father's silhouette filled the frame, his broad shoulders blocking out the morning sun. He wasn't supposed to be there. He never came unannounced. His visits were planned, rehearsed like everything else in his life. But this time, he came with purpose. "Morning, Nora," he said, his smile curling like a snake. "Invite me in, won't you?" My cheek was still swollen from Clifford's hand the night before. I pulled the collar of my dress higher, trying to hide it. My father's eyes flicked over my face, and I saw a flicker of satisfaction. He stepped inside, his boots clicking on the wooden floor. Clifford was still asleep in the bedroom, snoring like a child who had never carried the weight of betrayal. My father handed me the envelope. It was thick, heavy. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were neatly folded papers, legal documents stamped with bold lettering. "A deed to the farm," my father said, his voice dripping with pride. "I'm signing it over to you and Clifford. A wedding gift delayed." My throat tightened. The Whitmore farm was everything in our town. Acres of cornfields, barns, machinery, worth a fortune. People would kill for that land. Why? I whispered. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. Because land ties people together. And I don't like loose ends. You belong to me, Nora. Always. I felt the walls close in. This wasn't a gift. It was a chain. A way to bind me tighter. When Clifford finally stumbled out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes and stretching like a lazy boy, I placed the deed on the table. He froze. His eyes widened, and suddenly, the man who barely looked at me with affection lit up like a child on Christmas morning. He's giving us the farm? Clifford whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. Not us, I said bitterly. He's giving it to himself through us. Clifford ignored me. He threw his arms around my father, laughing. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. I turned away, ball rising in my throat. Clifford had sold me once for money, and now he would happily sell my soul again for land. Weeks later, we moved back to the Whitmore farm, my childhood home, the place I had once run through fields barefoot, singing into the wind. Now it felt like a graveyard. Neighbors congratulated us, saying how lucky we were, how generous my father was. They couldn't see the truth, that I was walking back into a prison built of corn and soil. The farmhouse was large, with peeling paint and creaky floors, but Clifford walked around as if he were the new king. He called it our empire. He invited friends over, drank beer on the porch, and played the role of proud landowner. Meanwhile, I became a ghost in my own home. I cooked meals, washed sheets, scrubbed floors, but inside I was screaming. Every corner of that house reminded me of the night my life had been destroyed. And every night, when the neighbors' lights went out and the crickets sang, my father would find reasons to visit. But something inside me had changed. The notebook I kept under the floorboards of our old apartment, I brought it with me. I wrote every night, pouring out my secrets onto those pages. I began hiding money, too. $1 here, $2 there. Clifford never noticed. My father never asked. I stashed it in a small tin box buried beneath the floor of the barn. It was a dangerous game, but it gave me a taste of freedom, a secret no one could take. And slowly, I started paying attention to people. To the farm hands my father hired, to the women in town, to the way people spoke when they thought no one was listening. Secrets, I realized, were a currency. And I was becoming rich in silence. On our 5th wedding anniversary, Clifford threw a small dinner. He invited a few neighbors, set the table with candles, and even bought me a new dress. To the world, we looked like a happy couple celebrating love. But halfway through the meal, Clifford made a toast. To Harold, he said, lifting his glass. The man who made all of this possible. Everyone clapped. My father grinned, soaking in the praise. And me? I sat there, smiling tightly, while my insides burned. That night, after the guests left, Clifford tried to touch me. I pushed him away. He scowled. Why are you always cold to me? I gave you a good life. A life? I spat. You gave me chains. He slapped me again. And this time I didn't cry. I just looked him in the eye and whispered, one day, Clifford. One day, you'll regret everything. It was around that time I met Jonas Holloway. He was a farmhand my father hired for the summer. He was tall, with kind eyes and calloused hands. Unlike Clifford, he spoke gently. Unlike my father, his gaze didn't pierce me. It warmed me. One evening, while I was hanging laundry, Jonas approached. Ma'am, he said softly, I couldn't help but notice you don't smile much. I froze. No one had dared to say that to me before. He added quickly, forgive me, I didn't mean to intrude. You deserve to smile. And then he walked away, leaving me breathless. That night, I wrote in my notebook. For the first time in years, someone saw me. Over the summer, Jonas and I spoke more. At first, it was small things about the weather, about crops, about town gossip. But slowly, the conversations grew deeper. I told him about my mother, about how I missed her lullabies, how I wished she had lived long enough to protect me. Jonas listened without judgment. Sometimes, his eyes grew dark with anger, though he never asked for details. One evening, he whispered, "You don't have to live like this forever, Nora." My heart pounded. "And go where?" "I have nothing." "You have yourself," he said. "That's more than they'll ever have." For the first time, hope flickered inside me like a candle in the dark. But hope is dangerous when you're trapped by monsters. One night, Clifford found my notebook. I had hidden it well, but I must have been careless. He stormed into the bedroom, waving it in the air. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. I froze. My secrets, my pain, my letters to Clara, all in his hands. He threw it against the wall, pages scattering. "You've been writing lies about me. About your father. Do you want to ruin us?" Tears filled my eyes. "It's the only thing that keeps me alive." His face twisted, and then he grabbed the notebook and tossed it into the fireplace. Flames devoured my words, my hope, my only voice. I screamed and tried to pull it out, but Clifford held me back. "No more lies," he hissed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart hollow. They had taken everything. My child, my freedom, my words. Or so they thought. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was unsigned, written in careful handwriting. It read, "Nora, I know what they've done to you. If you want out, meet me by the old bridge at midnight." Burn this letter after reading. My hands trembled as I held the paper. Who knew? Who dared to reach out? I looked toward the horizon, where the sun was setting over the cornfields. My heart pounded with fear, and something else I hadn't felt in years. Hope. But I didn't know then that letter would lead me into a storm far worse than anything I had endured before. The letter trembled in my hand long after I finished reading it. Someone knew. Someone had seen through the perfect mask my father and Clifford paraded around town. The words burned in my mind. "If you want out, meet me by the old bridge at midnight." For days, I carried the note tucked into my apron pocket. I reread it in secret, memorizing every loop of ink, every curve of the handwriting. Sometimes I thought it might be a cruel trick, something my father devised to test my loyalty. Other times, I thought maybe it was a trap from Clifford, waiting to catch me betraying him. But at night, when the farmhouse grew quiet and I lay awake staring at the cracks in the ceiling, I whispered to myself, "What if it's real? What if this is my chance?" I burned the letter in the stove, just as it instructed. The ashes swirled up the chimney like dark confetti. Then I began to wait for midnight. The night came heavy with fog. The air smelled of wet earth, and the cicadas sang their endless chorus. I wrapped myself in a dark shawl and slipped out the back door. My heart pounded with every step across the field, my boots sinking into the damp soil. The old bridge was nearly 2 miles away, a place kids used to play during summer, daring each other to jump into the creek. At midnight, it looked haunted. The wooden planks groaned under my weight as I stepped onto it. "Hello!" I whispered into the night. A figure emerged from the shadows. My breath caught in my throat. It was Jonas. "I knew it was you," I whispered, though part of me hadn't dared hope. He nodded. "I couldn't stand by anymore, Nora. I've seen too much. The bruises, the way you flinch when your father's around. You don't deserve this." Tears welled in my eyes. No one had ever said those words to me before, not with such conviction. "But how?" I asked, voice shaking. "If people knew, they'd never believe me. He's respected. He's untouchable." Jonas stepped closer. "Then we don't tell people. We leave. I can take you far from here. I've got work lined up in Kentucky. No one would follow us there." Leave. The word hit me like a thunderclap. For so long, I dreamed of running. But to hear it spoken aloud, to see it painted as a real possibility, it terrified me. "I can't," I whispered. "Clifford would find me. My father would." Jonas reached for my hand. His grip was warm, steady. "Nora, if you stay, they'll kill you. Maybe not with their hands, but with their control. Piece by piece, they'll take you until there's nothing left. Let me help you." And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt the faint stirrings of freedom. We began meeting in secret. At dawn, when the house was quiet, I'd sneak out under the guise of fetching water. At dusk, I'd pretend to walk the fields. Jonas and I spoke in whispers, planning, dreaming. He told me of a small cabin we could rent in Kentucky, far from my father's reach. He promised work on a tobacco farm, enough money for food and shelter. It wasn't much, but it was safety. I clung to the vision like a lifeline. But secrets have a way of breeding danger. Clifford began to notice my absences. My father's eyes narrowed when he saw me humming to myself. And one evening, as Jonas and I stood a little too close in the barn, I heard footsteps outside. Clifford. The barn door creaked open. Clifford stepped inside, his face red, his eyes sharp with suspicion. "What's this?" he snarled. "What are you two doing?" Jonas stepped forward. "Just finishing chores, sir. Nothing more." But Clifford wasn't convinced. He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "You've been sneaking around, haven't you? Meeting him in secret." "No," I stammered. "I swear." Clifford's eyes burned with fury. He turned to Jonas. "You stay away from her, or I'll make sure you regret ever setting foot on this farm." Jonas clenched his fists, but he didn't move. He knew better than to challenge a man who thought he owned the world. That night, Clifford dragged me into the bedroom and hissed, "If I ever catch you with him again, I'll kill him. And I'll make sure your father knows you've been unfaithful." His words slithered into my bones. I lay awake, trembling, wondering if freedom was worth another man's life. The next morning, Jonas found me by the well. His face was pale, but his voice steady. "I'm not afraid of him," he said. "I've faced worse men than Clifford. Please," I begged. "If he suspects, he'll kill you. He's already ruined me. I can't let him ruin you too." Jonas shook his head. "You're worth the risk, Nora. I can't just walk away." And then, in the quiet of the morning, he leaned down and kissed my forehead. It was the gentlest touch I had ever known. I wanted to weep. For the first time, I felt seen not as property, not as a burden, but as a woman. A week later, Clifford fell into a drunken rage after losing money in town. He smashed plates, shouted obscenities, and finally struck me so hard I fell against the wall. Blood trickled from my lip. Jonas saw the bruises the next day. His hands shook with anger. "I can't stand by anymore. We're leaving tomorrow night." Tomorrow night. The words terrified me, but they also lit a fire inside me. That day, I gathered what little I could, some clothes, a few hidden dollars from the barn, and Clara's ribbon, the only memory I had left of my baby girl. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay awake, heart pounding, praying that God would forgive me for running, and that he would keep Jonas safe. The following night, after Clifford passed out drunk on the couch, I slipped out of the farmhouse. The moon was high, casting silver across the fields. Jonas was waiting by the old bridge with a borrowed truck. My heart thundered as I climbed inside. For the first time in years, I felt the wind on my face as we drove away from that cursed farm. We crossed state lines before dawn. Jonas squeezed my hand, and I whispered, "We're free." But I was wrong. Because 2 days later, as we settled into the small cabin Jonas had promised, a car pulled up the dirt road. I peeked through the window. My blood turned to ice. It was my father. And standing beside him, smirking, with eyes full of rage, was Clifford. I remember waking up the next morning with my hands trembling, as if the memories from last night had settled into my bones. I stared at the ceiling, the same way I had done 1,000 times before in my younger years when I was too afraid to move. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl because you don't know if it means safety or danger. I thought for a moment that maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe all of it, the betrayal, the sale, the touch I never wanted, was just a cruel dream. But then I rolled to my side and felt the ache deep in my chest. My body remembered what my mind wished to forget. Graham was already gone. He had left without a word. No breakfast. No soft touch on my shoulder. No husband to lean on. Just the faint smell of his cologne on the pillow beside me, mocking me, as if to remind me he was still a part of me no matter how much I wanted to rip him out of my heart. I sat up slowly, clutching the sheets around me. My father's voice echoed in my head, his laugh, his whispers, the way he looked at me as if I was nothing more than property. It was the same tone he used when he used to lecture me as a girl, except now it was darker, more dangerous. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt tight, as if invisible hands were holding it closed. So instead, I stumbled to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water on my face. I stared at myself in the mirror, but I didn't recognize the woman looking back. I was only 18 back then, but in that moment I looked 50. My eyes were hollow, my lips pale, and my spirit fractured. I gripped the sink so hard that my knuckles turned white. "You will survive this," I whispered to myself. "You have to." But surviving wasn't simple. When Graham returned later that afternoon, he carried shopping bags in his hands. Jewelry, clothes, perfumes, the kind of things young brides dream about. He placed them on the bed with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Look, Nora," he said softly. "I got you these. We can move past last night. Let's not make a big deal out of it." I stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. How could he speak so calmly? How could he buy me trinkets and expect me to forget the way he sold me like a piece of cattle? I didn't say a word. I simply walked away, leaving the glittering necklaces and dresses untouched. That was the first crack in his charm, the moment he realized I would never see him the same again. From that day forward, my marriage became a performance. In public, we smiled. We held hands. We looked like the picture-perfect couple, the kind people pointed to and said, "Aren't they beautiful together?" But behind closed doors, silence grew louder than words, and fear became my closest companion. My father didn't stop. He found excuses, reasons to show up. Sometimes Graham invited him. Sometimes he came on his own. Each visit was a dagger in my chest, each encounter a reminder that I was trapped between two men who cared more about power and money than about me. The walls of my home became a prison. Every sound, every knock at the door made my stomach twist. I lost weight. My laughter faded. I stopped dreaming. But deep inside, a seed of resistance began to grow. Small at first. Fragile. Like a candle flickering in a storm. One night, while Graham slept peacefully beside me, I slipped out of bed and wrote in my hidden journal. I poured everything onto those pages. The betrayal, the pain, the fear, the rage. I told the truth to paper because I couldn't speak it to anyone else. Those pages became my only witness, my only friend. Still, life had a way of pushing me deeper into despair. Months passed, and whispers began circulating in town. People talked. Women looked at me with pity, though they didn't dare ask. Men looked at me differently, as if they knew some terrible secret. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into a place where no one could find me. Then came the day that changed everything again. It was a Sunday. The air was heavy with the smell of rain. I sat on the porch, staring at the gray clouds rolling in, when I heard the sound of tires on gravel. A black car pulled into the driveway. My heart dropped. The door opened, and out stepped my father. But he wasn't alone this time. A stranger followed him, a man in a dark suit with eyes that scanned me up and down like I was a prize waiting to be claimed. "This is her," my father said casually, as if introducing me to an old friend. "The one I told you about." My blood turned to ice. I looked at Graham, who had appeared in the doorway. He didn't stop it. He didn't even blink. That's when I realized the betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined. This wasn't just about one night. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, control, and greed with no end. The man in the suit stepped closer, his smile thin and cold. "She'll do," he said. And in that moment, I knew my nightmare was only beginning. If you're still with me, my dear listeners, keep listening. My story is far from over, and what comes next will make your heart race with anger and sorrow. Don't leave me now. Subscribe, stay close, and hear how I fought to reclaim my life. The stranger's eyes followed me like a shadow that would never let me go. He stood in the living room that evening, his shoes still damp from the rain outside, while my father leaned back on the sofa, sipping whiskey as if this was all just another business transaction. Graham lingered in the corner, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, avoiding my gaze like a coward who knew he was guilty but couldn't bring himself to admit it. My chest felt tight, like I was breathing through broken glass. The stranger, his name was Vincent, extended his hand as if I was supposed to greet him. "Nora," he said with a smile that made my stomach turn. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." I didn't move. I didn't speak. My silence was the only weapon I had left. My father laughed, the sound echoing off the walls like a cruel drumbeat. "Don't be shy, girl. Vincent is family now. You'll do as you're told." Family. The word cut through me. I wanted to scream, to rip the walls apart with my bare hands, but instead I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my skin. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor. My body shook. My tears fell silently. I wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the cracks between the tiles and never come back, but then something happened inside me. Something shifted. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen, my face pale, but for the first time, I didn't just see a victim staring back. I saw someone who could still fight. Someone who had been broken but not destroyed. I whispered to myself, "They don't own me. Not forever." The days that followed were unbearable. Vincent visited more often. My father treated me like property, and Graham, he became nothing more than a stranger who lived under the same roof. He stopped pretending to love me, stopped pretending to protect me. I was alone in every sense of the word. And yet, in that loneliness, I began to build a secret strength. I started hiding money, small amounts at first, coins left on tables, bills tucked away in drawers. I slipped them into the pages of my journal, folded them into the lining of my clothes. No one noticed because no one paid attention to me unless they wanted to use me. I also listened. While they talked about business, about money, about their disgusting plans, I listened. I memorized details, names, times. I collected every piece of information like a soldier preparing for war. I knew my time to escape would come. I just had to survive long enough to take it. But life doesn't always wait for your plans. Sometimes it pushes you before you're ready. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gray, Vincent returned. This time he wasn't smiling. He was angry, his jaw tight, his hands restless. He stormed into the house without knocking, his voice sharp and loud. "You promised me more, Walter," he shouted at my father. "You said she was mine to control, but she fights me at every turn. She's stubborn. Useless." I froze where I stood, my heart hammering in my chest. Graham looked between them, his face pale, his lips pressed tight. My father leaned forward in his chair, his eyes dark. "Then break her spirit. Do what you must. She'll fall in line." The words hit me like a slap. Break my spirit. As if I was a horse to be tamed. As if my soul was something they could twist and bend until it no longer belonged to me. Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, my voice trembling but loud enough to fill the room. "I am not yours. Not yours, not his, not anyone's." For a moment, silence filled the air. Vincent's eyes widened. My father's face hardened. Graham finally looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. Then the storm erupted. Vincent lunged toward me, his hand raised. But I ran. I darted through the hallway, my feet pounding against the floor, my breath ragged. I could hear them behind me, shouts, footsteps, the sound of rage closing in. I burst out the back door, and into the night. The air was cold, the ground damp with dew, but I didn't stop. I ran across the yard, through the field, into the darkness of the woods beyond. Branches scratched my arms, stones cut into my feet, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. And for the first time in so long, I felt alive. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually my legs gave out. I collapsed against a tree, my chest heaving, my tears mixing with the dirt on my cheeks. I was free, if only for a moment, but I knew it wouldn't last. They would come for me. My father, Vincent, even Graham, because without me, he had nothing. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling my heartbeat pounding like a drum. Not this time, I whispered to the night. Not this time. And right then, as if the universe wanted to test my courage, I heard it, the sound of engines in the distance. Headlights cutting through the trees. Voices calling my name. They were already hunting me. My dear listeners, do you see how far they would go to keep me trapped? Do you feel the danger closing in around me? Don't look away now. The storm is only growing darker, and you'll want to hear what happened when they finally caught up with me. Subscribe, stay close, and listen to how this nightmare twisted even further. The lights cut through the trees like sharp blades, slicing the night apart. My body trembled as I crouched low behind the thick trunk of an oak, my breath shallow, my palms pressed against the rough bark. Every muscle screamed at me to keep running, but my legs were too weak, too heavy. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure they could hear it. Nora. My father's voice thundered across the woods. You think you can run from me? You belong to me. Come out now. His words wrapped around me like chains, dragging me back into the fear I was trying to escape. The headlights grew closer, sweeping across the underbrush. I knew if they reached me, if they found me hiding there, the punishment would be worse than anything I had endured before. I pressed my forehead against the tree, praying, not to be strong, not to be brave, but simply to survive. Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby. My body froze. The sound was too close, too deliberate. I turned my head just enough to see a shadow moving between the trees, the beam of a flashlight dancing over the ground. Vincent. He was muttering under his breath, his voice low and seething. She thinks she's clever, but she can't hide forever. My throat tightened. If I stayed, he'd find me. If I moved, I'd give myself away. And then instinct took over. I bolted. The leaves crunched beneath my feet as I pushed through the branches, my arms tearing against thorns, my breath ragged and desperate. Shouts erupted behind me, followed by the roar of engines as the vehicles jerked forward, their lights bouncing violently over the terrain. Don't let her get away, my father bellowed. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My only thought was forward, forward, forward. The woods opened up into a clearing, and beyond it, a river stretched wide and dark under the moonlight. The water rushed angrily, swollen from days of rain. It was dangerous, unpredictable, but it was also my only chance. I stumbled to the edge, the mud sucking at my shoes. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the wild current. Could I survive it? Could I even make it across? The voices drew closer. The flashlights cut through the trees. I had no choice. I stepped into the freezing water, my body jolting from the cold, and then I plunged deeper, forcing myself into the current. The river seized me like a beast, pulling me under, tossing me side to side. I gasped for air, my arms flailing, my lungs burning. For a moment, I thought it was over. I thought I would sink into the black water and vanish. But then I remembered I couldn't die. Not yet. Not when my story wasn't finished. Not when they would win if I gave up now. I kicked, clawed, fought against the water until, by some miracle, my hand found a branch jutting out near the far bank. I clung to it with everything I had, coughing and choking, and finally dragged myself onto the muddy shore. My body collapsed, soaked and trembling, but I was alive. For the first time in so long, I felt a flicker of triumph. I had escaped them. I had slipped through their fingers. But that flicker didn't last long, because when I lifted my head, I saw something in the distance. Headlights again, different ones this time, not my father's trucks. A single vehicle sat on the dirt road, its engine idling softly, its lights casting a pale glow over the trees. For a moment, I dared to hope it was salvation. Maybe a stranger who would help me. Maybe fate had finally taken pity on me. I stumbled toward the road, my legs shaky, my body aching. As I got closer, The driver's door opened, and a figure stepped out. It was Graham. He stood there in the glow of the headlights, his face pale, his eyes unreadable. My chest tightened as I stared at him, unsure if I should run to him or run from him. He raised a hand, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Nora, please. Get in the car." Tears burned in my eyes. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think he had finally chosen me, that he had come to save me. But another part of me, the part that had been betrayed too many times, screamed that this was another trap. I took a step back, shaking my head.
No.
Not again. I won't go back. His eyes softened, but there was something behind them I couldn't trust. "If you don't, they'll find you. You know they will. Please, Nora. Let me protect you this time." The wind whipped around us, carrying the sound of distant voices. My father and Vincent were still searching. Time was running out. I looked at Graham, torn between hope and fear. My heart screamed at me to run, but my body was too weak, too broken. And in that moment of hesitation, Graham moved closer. His hand reached out, slow and deliberate, like a man trying not to scare a wounded animal. "Nora," he whispered, "trust me." I stared at him, my chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. And then, behind him, I saw the shadows of two more figures stepping out of the trees. My father, Vincent. They had found us. The night closed in around me like a vice. The river roared behind me, the headlights burned into my eyes, and there I was, trapped between Graham's outstretched hand and the shadows of my father and Vincent moving closer. My chest tightened until I thought it might collapse. "Don't fight it, Nora." My father's voice cut through the dark like a blade. "Come home. You've embarrassed us enough. Home." He dared to call that place home. My stomach churned. Vincent stepped beside him, his smirk thin and sharp. "You really thought you could run? You're mine, Nora. I'll break you, if it takes the rest of your life." I felt the mud shift beneath my feet as I backed away, my mind spinning, my heart pounding like war drums. Graham's eyes locked on mine, softer than theirs, almost pleading. "Let me help you, Nora.
Please.
Trust me this time." How could I trust him? The man who sold me? The man who watched while my father destroyed me? And yet, in that terrible moment, his voice was the only one that didn't feel like a dagger. "Step away from her, Graham," my father snapped, his face twisted with rage. "She's not your wife anymore. She's nothing but property." Those words pierced me deeper than anything else.
Property.
As if I wasn't flesh and blood. As if I didn't bleed, breathe, and cry. And then something inside me cracked wide open. I straightened my back, my body trembling but my voice steady. "I am not property. I am not yours. I never was." The air went still. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. My father's face darkened. He stormed forward, his hand raised like he meant to strike me down right there in the mud. Instinctively, I stumbled back, straight into Graham's arms. For a moment, everything froze. His arms wrapped around me, holding me steady, and I felt the faintest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, safety. But it was tangled with fear, because I still didn't know if I could believe him. "Don't touch her," Vincent roared, lunging forward. And then chaos erupted. Graham pushed me behind him and stood tall, his voice firm. "Enough. She's not your toy, and she's not for sale anymore." The words stunned me. My father's eyes went wide, Vincent snarled, and I clutched the tree for balance. Did Graham mean it? Was this his redemption, or just another cruel trick? My father stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "You dare defy me, boy? After all I gave you?" "All you gave me," Graham spat back, "was a deal with the devil. I won't be part of it anymore." Vincent's hand shot into his jacket, and for the first time, I saw the glint of metal. A gun. My breath caught. My body froze. The world shrank to the circle of light cast by the headlights and the weapon that gleamed in Vincent's grip. "Move," Vincent growled, "or I'll put you down right here." Graham didn't flinch. His body stood firm between me and the barrel of the gun. "You'll have to kill me first." And in that moment, I believed him. The standoff stretched long and unbearable, each second an eternity. My father's face was pale with fury, Vincent's finger twitched near the trigger, and Graham's chest rose and fell in steady defiance. I didn't know what would happen next. A gunshot? A scream? My own death? Right there in the mud? But then, the sound of another engine broke through the night. Headlights appeared at the edge of the road, cutting across ours. Tires screeched as another car pulled up fast, gravel spraying in all directions. For a moment, no one moved. We all turned toward the new arrival. The door opened, and out stepped a woman. Tall, sharp-eyed, her coat whipping in the wind. She didn't look like anyone I had ever seen before, but her voice carried the weight of authority as she spoke. "Enough," she called out. "Put the gun down." Vincent stiffened. My father's jaw clenched. Graham turned slightly, confusion flickering across his face. The woman stepped forward, her hand resting near her own hip where I caught the faint outline of a badge. Law enforcement. My heart leapt, but fear twisted around it. What if she was with them? What if this was another layer of their control? Vincent sneered. "This is none of your business." "It's every bit my business," she replied coldly. "Walter, you've gone too far. Step aside." Walter. She knew my father's name. She knew him. My mind raced, my pulse hammering as the pieces twisted together in ways I didn't understand. Who was this woman? How did she know him? And why now, after years of silence, was she here? Before I could even breathe the questions, Vincent's arm snapped up, the gun pointing straight at her. And then, I woke up one morning to find the world outside quiet, almost too quiet. The air smelled like burnt coffee from the kitchen downstairs, but I knew no one had brewed anything for me. Silas had taken to making his own breakfast, and leaving me with nothing. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I'd find a slice of cold bread left on the counter. Most mornings, it was just an empty plate, as if to mock me. At 75, my body ached for warmth, food, kindness, but instead, I was surrounded by silence and cruelty. He had started locking my phone in a drawer. He said I was too old to be trusted with calls, that I would cause trouble by talking to neighbors. He didn't want me speaking to anyone. And my father, who was now very old himself, would only nod when Silas tightened his grip on me. It was like watching two generations of men join hands to keep me caged. I used to think marriage was supposed to protect a woman. But mine had sold me, broken me, and thrown away the key. I stared out the window, the garden overgrown with weeds. I remembered how I once dreamed of planting roses there. Instead, it looked like a forgotten graveyard. That's what I felt like, buried while still breathing. But even in that hopelessness, something stirred in me. Something small but alive. I wasn't ready to let them kill all of me. It started with small defiance. I would hide scraps of bread in my pocket when Silas wasn't looking. I began keeping a tiny notebook under my mattress, writing everything they did to me. Each word was like a weapon, like proof that I wasn't crazy. I wanted the world to know someday. I wanted them to see what had been done to me. One night, I heard Silas whispering on the phone. His voice was sharp, filled with anger. "She's costing me more than she's worth," he said. "I should have never agreed to this. Maybe it's time we put her in a home." My blood ran cold.
A home.
A nursing facility. He wasn't just talking about leaving me there, he was talking about disappearing me. I had heard stories of old women dropped into those places, never seen again. The way he said it made me feel like I was already on death row. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, clutching my little notebook. My hands shook, but my heart beat stronger than ever. If they were planning to erase me, I had to move first. The next day, I acted normal. I smiled when Silas told his lies. I cooked when he demanded it. I let my father sneer at me without protest. But inside, I was planning. I noticed the mailman stopped by at noon every day. For weeks, I hadn't been allowed near the mailbox. But that afternoon, when Silas forgot to lock the back door, I slipped outside barefoot, my notebook pressed against my chest. I shoved a page into an envelope I had saved, scrawled a desperate message on the front. Help me. This is real. Please. I didn't know who would find it, but I left it where the mailman could see. I felt both terrified and alive. For the first time in years, I had done something for myself. But courage has a cost. That evening, Silas stormed into the room, his face red, his eyes wild. He held the crumpled envelope in his hand. "Did you think you could trick me?" he screamed. His fist slammed the wall, inches from my head. My father stood behind him, smiling faintly, as though enjoying the show. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. "You want to bring strangers into this house?" Silas hissed. "You want to shame us? You'll regret this." He grabbed me by the arm, dragging me down the hallway. My legs barely kept up. He shoved open the basement door, the smell of damp concrete rising to meet me. "You'll stay here until you learn your place," he said, and with a sick grin, he pushed me inside. The door slammed. The lock clicked. I was in darkness. Cold, damp, terrifying darkness. I stumbled, reaching for the wall, but there was nothing but stone and shadows. My knees buckled as the truth hit me. Silas had locked me in the basement like I was nothing more than a dangerous animal. I screamed for help until my throat was raw. No one came. I thought of the roses I never planted. I thought of the little girl I once was, full of hope. I thought of the $1 million that had bought my silence and pain. And then I heard footsteps above me. Slow, heavy. My father's cane tapping the floorboards. He stopped directly over where I sat trembling. Then, in a chilling voice that carried through the boards, he said, "This is where you belong, Nora. Buried alive, just like your mother should have been." My knees gave out. My heart shattered all over again. But deep inside, something else sparked, something stronger than fear. If they thought this was the end of me, they had no idea what storm I was about to unleash. If you're listening to me now, remember this. Silence is the enemy. Don't let anyone cage your voice, no matter how old you are. I need you to keep walking with me through this story. Share it, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. My story isn't over, and the next part will leave you breathless. The basement was cold enough to make my bones ache. I could smell mold, old dust, and something rotten that lingered in the corners. My hands brushed across damp stone walls, searching for anything, a crack, a splinter, even a nail. Nothing. Just the emptiness of a place designed to keep me hidden. Time lost meaning down there. Hours bled into days. Or maybe it was only a few nights. I couldn't tell anymore. Silas brought scraps of food now and then, stale bread, watery soup. He didn't speak to me, not even once. He'd set the plate on the step and slam the door before I could say a word. My father never came down, but I knew he was listening upstairs, waiting, feeding on my silence like a vulture. I thought of death often. It would have been easier to close my eyes and not wake up. But something inside me refused to die. I was 75 years old, but I wasn't finished. I had carried too much, endured too much, to end in darkness. So I began to plan. The notebook I once hid under my mattress was gone. They must have taken it. But I still had my memory, sharper than they believed. Every word, every insult, every act of cruelty was written inside me now. I would remember it all, and I would make sure the world heard it. I counted the steps when Silas opened the door. 10 wooden steps from the top to the basement floor. The lock clicked twice, one heavy, one light. If I listened carefully, I could almost hear the pattern of the key. I also noticed something else. When he came at night, his steps dragged. I could smell alcohol on him. He drank before visiting me. That meant one night he might slip. He might forget. One evening, the door cracked open, and I saw his shadow against the dim light. He muttered something under his breath, tossed the plate of soup down, and stumbled back up the stairs. But this time the lock didn't sound right. My breath caught. I waited. My heart pounded louder than the silence. Slowly, carefully, I pushed against the door. It creaked. And then, miracle of miracles, it opened. The hallway smelled of wood polish and fried meat. My legs trembled as I climbed out, barefoot, weak but free. I could hear Silas snoring in the living room. My father was nowhere in sight. This was my chance. I tiptoed toward the back door. Each step was agony, my knees threatening to give out. My hands shook as I reached for the knob. For the first time in years, I felt the air of freedom brush against my skin. But just as I pulled the door open, a voice sliced through the night. "Where do you think you're going?" My father's voice.
Sharp.
Mocking. I froze. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, his cane tapping the floor, his eyes burning into me like knives. "You think you can walk away from us, Nora? After everything? You belong here." I wanted to scream, to run, but my body betrayed me. He stepped closer, his cane clicking against the tiles, his hand trembling but still powerful. "You were bought.
Paid for.
Do you understand? $1 million wasn't for love. It was for obedience." My knees buckled. I leaned against the doorframe, the night air still brushing my face, freedom so close I could taste it. But then Silas appeared, rubbing his eyes, holding a bottle in one hand. His face twisted into a drunken sneer. "Trying to run, old woman," he growled. "You'll regret that." He lunged forward, grabbing my wrist so hard I thought the bone would snap. I cried out, the sound echoing through the quiet house. "Let her go!" I shouted, twisting, kicking, fighting with every ounce of strength I had left. For the first time, I fought back, not as a victim, but as a woman refusing to disappear. Silas staggered, surprised by the force of my resistance. I slammed the door into him with all my weight. The bottle flew from his hand, crashing against the wall. He roared in anger, stumbling backward. My father shouted something, but I didn't hear it. All I heard was the pounding of my heart as I ran barefoot into the night, the gravel cutting my feet, the cold wind tearing at my hair. I was free. For the first time in decades, I was free. But freedom is fragile. As I reached the edge of the property, headlights blinded me. A car screeched to a stop, the horn blaring. I froze like a deer. The door flung open, and a man stepped out. He wasn't a stranger. It was my son. The son I hadn't seen in years. The son Silas had told me would never come back. "Mom," he gasped, his voice trembling. "Oh my God. What have they done to you?" Tears filled my eyes, but before I could answer, before I could throw myself into his arms, another sound split the night. A shotgun cocking. I turned. My father stood on the porch, the weapon steady in his hands, pointed straight at me. His voice carried across the night, cold and deadly. "If you leave, Nora, you die." And that, my dear listener, is where I'll stop for now. My story is a storm, and you've only seen part of it. If you're still with me, share this video, comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe. The next chapter will decide everything: life, death, and justice. The night stood still, as though even the stars were holding their breath. My son's headlights cut across the yard, throwing long shadows that danced like ghosts. I could feel the gravel cutting into my bare feet, the wind clawing at my hair. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was the shotgun pointed at me, steady in my father's trembling hands. "Don't move, Nora," he growled. His voice was old, cracked, but filled with venom. "You walk away, and I'll put you in the ground myself." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had faced his cruelty all my life, but never like this. Never with death staring at me from the hollow of a gun barrel. Behind me, I heard my son's voice again, broken, desperate. "Dad, what are you doing? Put the gun down. That's your daughter." For a second, I thought the words might break through. But my father only sneered, his eyes narrowing. "She was never my daughter. She was my burden, my shame. And I'll end her before I let her shame me again."
Shame.
That was the word he had carried all his life, the poison he had fed me since childhood. I was nothing but a vessel for his rage. "Mom, get behind me," my son shouted, rushing forward. He placed himself between me and the gun, his arms outstretched. His voice cracked with fear and fury. "If you're going to shoot her, you'll have to shoot me too." I gasped, my knees almost giving out. After all the years of silence, of being told my children would never love me again, here was proof my son still cared. He was willing to stand in the line of fire for me. But Silas stumbled out onto the porch, his face flushed with alcohol, his eyes bloodshot. "Everybody calm down," he slurred, though his tone carried no peace. "She belongs here. She ain't going nowhere. Dad's right, if she talks, we lose everything." "Lose what?" my son roared. "Money? Control? You've already lost your souls." The words hit like a whip. For the first time in years, I saw fear flicker in Silas's eyes. My son was no longer a boy they could scare into silence. He was a man, strong, determined, unwilling to bow. I stepped forward, my voice trembling but steady. "You sold me, Silas, for $1 million. To this man who called himself my father. You let him do unspeakable things, and you stood by. But you forgot one thing." They both turned to me. The air tightened. Even the night creatures seemed to pause. "I survived," I whispered. "And now I will be heard." The moment hung heavy until my father snarled and pulled the trigger. The blast split the night. My son tackled me to the ground just as the shot tore through the air. Gravel cut my arms, the earth bruised my ribs, but I was alive. My son's body shielded mine. The gun roared again. Splinters flew as the porch railing shattered. "Run, Mom," my son shouted, pulling me up, his hand gripping mine like steel. We sprinted toward his car, my bare feet slicing against the stones, blood marking the path behind me. Silas screamed curses. My father bellowed with rage, another shot echoing through the dark. The car door opened, and my son shoved me inside. He jumped into the driver's seat, turning the key with trembling hands. The engine roared to life. But before we could pull away, Silas appeared at the driver's side, his face twisted with fury. He smashed the window with his bare fist, glass exploding across the seats. My son cried out, trying to shove him back, but Silas grabbed his shirt, pulling him halfway out the window. "No!" I screamed, clawing at Silas's arm, striking him with all the strength left in me. My nails tore his skin, blood running down his wrist. He let out a howl, loosening his grip just long enough for my son to slam the car into reverse. The tires screeched, flinging gravel and dust. Silas fell backward, cursing, his face a mask of blood and rage. We sped down the road, the night swallowing us. My chest heaved, my body shaking uncontrollably. My son's hands clutched the wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. For the first time in decades, I was away from that house. Away from the prison they had built around me. But freedom is never that simple. Blue and red lights flashed in the rearview mirror. Sirens wailed, cutting through the night. My son's face drained of color. "They called the police," he muttered. "They'll tell them you're crazy, that you wandered off, that you're dangerous." My stomach dropped. I knew he was right. Silas and my father had always been experts at lies. They'd twist everything, and I'd be the one locked away in some hospital, silenced forever. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not this time. We'll tell them the truth. Every ugly, shameful piece of it. I've been quiet too long." But even as I spoke, the lights grew closer, the sirens louder. My son's hands trembled. "Mom, if they don't believe us," he couldn't finish the sentence. I reached over, gripping his hand, my voice shaking but firm. "Then we make them believe." The car screeched to a halt as two police cruisers blocked the road ahead. Doors opened. Guns drawn. Flashlights blinded us. "Step out of the vehicle," a voice boomed. My heart pounded like thunder. This was it. My chance to be free, or my final cage. And then, from the shadows, I saw him. Silas. Limping, bleeding, but smiling. Standing behind the officers, whispering into their ears. My father beside him, cane steady, face twisted with smug satisfaction. They had gotten here first. And I knew then my fight for freedom was only beginning. The police lights flooded the night, painting the world in blue and red. My chest tightened as I stepped off the car, my son's hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. Guns were pointed at us, flashlights blazing in our faces. Behind the officers stood my father and Silas, bloody, bruised, but smiling like men who already knew they had won. "She's unstable," Silas said, his voice slurred but sharp enough to cut. "My wife has dementia. She wanders off, makes up stories. She's been dangerous before." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the lies from his mouth. But the officers nodded, listening, their guns still trained on us. "She attacked me tonight," my father added, his cane tapping against the pavement for effect. "My own daughter tried to kill me. We had to protect ourselves." My son shook his head, shouting, "That's not true. They're lying. They've been hurting her for years." But the officers didn't lower their guns. One of them muttered into his radio. Another stepped closer. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clipped, "we need you to come with us. For your safety, and everyone else's."
No.
Not again. I had lived too many years locked in cages built from other people's lies. If I stepped into that car, I would never leave. I would vanish into some home, drugged and silenced until I became nothing but a whisper. "No," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "You will listen to me." The officer hesitated. For a moment, just a moment, the world held still. And then I did something that surprised even me. I dropped to my knees on the gravel, blood from my torn feet staining the earth, and I shouted, not at the officers, not at Silas, not even at my father. I shouted at the night. "My name is Nora Mayfield. I am 75 years old. And for 50 years, my husband and father have kept me prisoner. He sold me for $1 million, so that man could hurt me. They locked me in a basement. They starved me. They told the world I was crazy, but I am not crazy. I am alive." My voice tore through the air like a storm. The officers froze. My son knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder, tears streaming down his face. "Tell them, Mom," he whispered. "Tell them everything."
So I did.
Every word I had kept locked inside for decades poured out. My father's abuse, Silas's betrayal, the basement, the shotgun, my escape. I spoke like a woman with nothing left to lose. And as I spoke, I saw something shift. The officers lowered their guns. Their eyes no longer saw a frail old woman. They saw a survivor. But my father snarled, stepping forward, his voice cracking with rage. "She's lying. She's always been a liar." "Shut up, Dad," my son roared, his voice breaking. "You don't get to control her anymore." Silas lunged then, desperate, grabbing for me like he could still drag me back into his cage. But my son moved faster. He shoved him hard, Silas stumbling backward into the police. "Enough," one officer barked. He pinned Silas against the car, another yanking the shotgun from my father's hands. The night exploded into chaos.
Shouts.
Handcuffs snapping shut. My father screaming curses as the officers dragged him back. Silas kicking, spitting, his eyes wild. And me, kneeling on the gravel, my body broken, my soul shaking, but finally free. I don't remember much after that. Blue and red lights blurred into nothing. My son carried me to his car. The officers promised justice. Neighbors began to gather, whispers spreading like wildfire. But I remember one thing clearly. As they shoved my father into the police cruiser, he locked eyes with me, his face twisted in fury. "This isn't over, Nora," he hissed. But he was wrong. For me, it was. The trial came months later. My father too weak to stand for long, Silas pale and defeated. The evidence piled high, the notebook they hadn't found, my son's testimony, the marks on my body, the neighbors who had heard the gunshots. For the first time, the truth won. My father died in custody before sentencing. Silas was sent away for life. And me? I planted my roses. Every morning, I sit in my garden, the sun warm on my face, the air filled with the scent of flowers. My hands are wrinkled, my body fragile, but my soul is stronger than ever. I tell my story to anyone who will listen, because silence almost killed me, and I will never be silent again. If you are listening now, take this with you. Do not let anyone steal your voice. You are never too old, too broken, too forgotten to rise again. This is my truth. This is my freedom. And I survived. If you've walked this journey with me, thank you. Share my story, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Because when we tell the truth, we set others free too.